Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more.
When we talk about breaking down silos in the revenue organization, we talk a lot about culture, about communication, working together, collaboration, alignment, and kind of all the benefits in those realms of breaking down the silos between marketing, between sales and customer success. But there are actually other benefits when it comes to capital efficiency, growth margins, and increasing shareholder value that a great CRO can unlock and that are potentially more important than ever in today's market, today's economy. And so that is what we're going to talk to you guys about today. So I'm your host, Sarah Hicks. And today on the Predictable Revenue Podcast, I'm going to be chatting with an expert about the financial impact of breaking down your revenue organization silos. He's a high-performing go-to-market leader with over 10 years of experience within SaaS and enterprise tech. He has a proven record of success for developing and executing strategy and creating a repeatable framework to accelerate revenue growth. And that's why we're so excited to have him on the show. Tayler, welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for having me. I always feel uncomfortable whenever people lay out the rap sheet or the intro there. Just at the end of the day, I mean, I'm just somebody just like anybody else that's out here just trying to make it, try to figure all this stuff out. I've had some really good experiences doing this with several different companies and learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And, I kind of feel like my role here is just to share some of the lessons I've learned and share why I have strong convictions about certain things and, ultimately, why I feel the way I feel about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to dive into that because, yeah, you're right. We're all out here trying a bunch of stuff. Some people figure out what sticks. And when they do, they need to share it with the rest of us. So tell me a little bit about your transition first into the CRO role, because it's your first time in that particular role, obviously coming from a whole revenue adjacent background or related background. So tell me about being a CRO as opposed to a sales leader.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I definitely will say it's been a humbling experience. I think every sales leader has very hot opinions about how other functional areas should be run. And I definitely had very hot opinions about that. And, whenever I started making that transition, I think it really helped humble me in terms of how challenging some of those other functional areas are. And, how you really got to, figure out the different flows around that. And, ultimately, you can't manage the whole broader scope of everything underneath the go-to-market umbrella the same way that you would manage a sales team, the same way you've done it over and over again. They're motivated different. The KPIs are different, all those things. So I really do feel like it was a pretty humbling experience. Also just kind of, up leveling myself to more of, having more financial responsibility, having more equity stake in the game, those things like that. It really made me have to look at things in terms of, okay, what's just not right for me meeting, the goals and objectives of my team, but ultimately, what are the things that I need to be doing and thinking of to make sure that I'm a good steward of capital, that I'm doing things that are smart to and create shareholder value. It is about increasing revenue, but it's also about doing it kind of like what you said at the beginning, in the most capital efficient way possible, and doing that quickly. I really had to take a crash course in terms of up leveling, just my financial literacy from a corporate standpoint. And just getting really close to my executive peers in terms of my VP of finance and working tighter with my CEO and things like that. But it definitely wasn't like a super easy transition. I think it was one of those things that I always had very high ambition for, and I knew that's what I wanted to do with my career. I definitely, like probably a lot of folks, this has been talked about a lot, how just those silos in terms of like the way the customer journey is laid out, it's all one big thing now. The best sellers are actually really good at marketing. When a deal gets stalled, they know how to actually educate the buyer. the best marketers are actually really good, just revenue thinkers. They know how to create things that generate leads and actually impact deals and flights. And, customer success is now the biggest, the second biggest revenue driver in terms of, NRR being a massive metric now. And so, we've all kind of thought about those things, but, really kind of pulling all those things together under one umbrella, it's not easy, but it's really just kind of figuring out the things that to where you need to improve and just start kind of chipping away at it.
Yeah. I think, and something that you mentioned there and kind of around our point around doing the most efficient things we can with the capital that we have, as opposed to just revenue for revenue's sake. I think we're kind of coming out of that era, and people are starting to be a little bit less tricked by, maybe not being the right word, but like the huge valuation. We kind of get that that's not it's not a realistic view of what is actually going on within that business, and it doesn't indicate if that's going to be a successful, sustainable business. And then the kind of knock-on impact of that is that investors are starting to look back at these things and say, like, I actually don't care about all that. What I care is about these efficiency metrics and what you're doing with this money and the sustainability and all of that stuff. And even if you're looking at an IPO, like, people out there are starting to invest with more of a sustainable mindset, as opposed to just like, ooh, shiny object, $9 billion valuation, that looks good. So I think it's a really interesting thing to bring up now, because we need to be much more efficient with our capital. And that seems to be the way that the world is shifting. So what we're going to kind of walk through here is how you can be that CRO of that company that graduates from that really like startup, revenue is the only thing that matters, and kind of graduates into their next phase of growth. One of the things that you mentioned, one of the things that's really common when we're dealing with this breakdown of communication, or the kind of animosity between these different silos, is the concept of attribution. Everyone is kind of looking at different numbers. Nobody really knows where anything comes from. So how have you dealt with that as a new CRO?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, it's kind of like everybody creates their own scoreboard, right? And a lot of it is one, just getting alignment on the top operating KPIs that you want to align across the org, right? And ultimately kind of figuring out, what those need to be, and then really understanding where that data is going to come from. So we don't have multiple disparate systems doing that. And then really kind of aligning that ultimately to the top level KPIs around, revenue growth, doing that as quickly as possible, and doing it as most capitally efficient as possible, which we can kind of talk about all those different metrics. But really the first thing is to get everybody to agree, take labels off of it, right? And this is something I do feel like I've had some success with, is that we immediately were very intentional about removing labels from groups. And I know this is small, but these little things matter, because ultimately we all kind of put our own labels on things, and it just kind of grows into something. Instead of calling it a sales meeting, it's a revenue team meeting. Instead of calling it, a sales team, a marketing team, CS team, we call it, hey, this revenue team, or whatever it might be. And so like, even just like the little small thing, like instead of sales op, revenue ops, so we've really tried to kind of take labels off of things. Just part of our meeting cadence too is that, everybody that impacts revenue, which is the majority of the company, they're involved in forecast calls and QBRs. They're open invitations to anything from a marketing meeting. They have input on what events we're doing. We have really good alignment in terms of using enablement internally to connect those dots. But a lot of it is just really just don't let the silo like start in the first place. And a lot of it is just like the optics and labels. And then also a lot of it too is just about bringing in the right people. And I know that kind of goes without saying, but the number one thing that we look for folks in any type of role is just how collaborative they are. It actually mixes really well with how we go to market and how we sell. We have a larger price tag, higher ACV type solution, 6-7 type deal figure, to where, it requires a lot of cross-functional collaboration, but at the same time, at all levels, we need people that just generally they just like working across groups. And so we really try to, screen and identify and dial in people that are really collaborative. So, at the end of the day, look, sir, we could talk KPIs, financial metrics, and all this stuff all day long. It doesn't matter what kind of business we're talking about. It's a people business, right? And really starts with getting the right people and people with low egos and are really collaborative. And this is kind of a weird thing to say, but I would say that the people that have done extremely well at our company are the ones that have enough experience to where like they appreciate what we have. They have a really good way of kind of having a good calibration of saying, hey, look, I know what I'm going to do. I've had enough experience to where I know what good looks like. I know what bad looks like. And, I'm not really interested in wasting my time on drama and nonsense. I'm here to really, really have a big impact. And, I'm kind of at that point to where I'm really ready to up level my career and I want to do something big and impactful. So a lot of it is just finding people that are have the right personality traits around collaboration and low ego, but also folks that are just kind of at that right career stage to where they're really ready to like do something challenging and kind of make that leap. And we've had to screen pretty hard for that. This might be like a little unpopular, but like, one question I asked, folks coming into our org is I'm like, hey, look, like, are you really ready to do something challenging? This could potentially be the hardest job you've ever had. Now, after I just said that, does that make you feel excited or how do you feel? And if they don't tell me that it excites them, like, then it's like, okay, well, if you don't have the energy right now, this might not be for you. And I think that's okay. So I know that's a really long-winded answer around one, get the right KPIs in place at the highest level. And we have guiding principles around all those things. We take all the labels off in terms of where does it come from too. So outside of just booked ARR, whenever you think about kind of the other inflection points in your funnel, for us, it's leads generated, it's demos passed, it's proof of concepts entered. And those are kind of our heat checks. And we do the reverse funnel math there, build the bottoms up, of course. But whenever we look at that, there is zero measurement about whether that comes from inbound or events or from the BDR team or whether it's sourced from the field. It doesn't matter. Because the reality is that everybody influences that in a positive way. The reputation we create from the sales experience, the content marketing's creating, people that we're meeting in events, and also like, I don't want marketing just focused on inbound or events. They influence deals in flight as well. And to take that away from them, to say that you don't like, get credit for that it's absolutely silly. Because if I could shave, we're enterprise sales. So, we're 9-12 months on a sales cycle. If I can shave 90 days off my sales cycle because they're creating better content to show how this is already providing value at other organizations of similar size, that is so material in nature as opposed to creating one more inbound lead. So that's another big thing, is just take the label off of where it comes from too. It doesn't matter. Kind of diving in one layer deeper too. So me being, a sales leader at heart, I'm big on comp design. And one thing that I feel like has been highly successful is everybody's on a commission plan. And it's a very conservative mix, like it should be, given that it's enterprise, but everybody gets paid the same way the sales team would get paid, to where it's not like, well, hey, there's not a sense of urgency from marketing, or hey, sales just does deals and throws it across the table. Everybody's comped off of our ARR goals. When it comes in, everybody gets bonus then. So everybody's really aligned. And whenever I say everybody, I mean marketing, anybody that supports revenue, so enablement, ops, our sales engineering team, and then obviously quota carrying salespeople and the BDR team. And the BDR team's not just comp for, producing a sales opportunity at demo pass, which is even beyond, disco and the meeting booked and all that. They're comp for, hey, you found this deal. Because I actually want the BD team to continue to influence the deal and go find expansion opportunities. While that 9 to 12 month deal is in flight, they could go find other lines of business to go bring into that deal. If it's going to take 9 to 12 months, we might as well go figure out a way to go add more value and ultimately have a larger opportunity with that customer. And then, we want marketing thinking about like not just top of funnel, but ultimately where are we getting slowed down? And that starts with good data and metrics and saying, okay, where are we getting pinched in the funnel? And how do we create really good content that speaks to what the value of the next step? Like what are you going to get out of this proof of value exercise? Benchmark data, a business case, those things like that, like some examples of those things. So I don't know. At the end of the day, like I think we all know that all these things are connected, and they're so tightly connected. I mean, not to leave product out of the conversation, but none of this happens without product, and but at the same time, like, we arbitrarily create our own labels, and we try to kind of take our own prizes and try to get overly competitive as leaders within our own functional space. And look, like this goes without saying, like running early growth companies is hard. Whenever things get sideways or you're under pressure, people start pointing fingers. So the more that you could just get everybody just tightly wound up, comp affects those things, I think you just got to really take the labels off and then really intertwine these things to the point of like, okay, this is even how people are getting paid. This is how people provide for their families. And that's motivating.
Absolutely. So you're taking the labels off of everything, pulling everyone into that revenue team, as you mentioned, making sure that those KPIs are leading towards the common goal, as opposed to these things that have kind of organically grown into something in each of those separate silos. Pulling all of those people together, having the meetings all together, and then compensating everyone on the same goal so that everybody's got skin in the game. And that all of that, of course, ties into being efficient with capital. And one of the things that you guys have been able to do over the last little bit here is hit triple-digit growth without spending a whole bunch of money. So walk me through that and how you managed to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and look, Sarah, I'll give props to our CEO. He came in with a very strong financial background as a former investment banker. It's my first time actually working. Yeah, it was my first time working for a non-product CEO. It was different. And one of the reasons why I was very interested in working for him was that I wanted to level up and partner with somebody that could help me get stronger in that area. And, typically whenever you start to kind of put together your plans and, kind of think about your capacity models and all this stuff, it's really, you start working back from the number, and it's, this many people, this many leads equals XYZ, how we all do. And there's really not that much financial input into it outside of like, hey, here's how much it's going to cost. Are we good? Or do we need to kind of scale it?
Do we cover our costs and is that it? Yeah.
yeah. Or scale it up and down and try to adjust from the number. And so what we really did is we looked at world-class financial metrics in terms of capital efficiency and worked from it backwards. So we said, okay, in the 99th percentile, like what are the companies like in terms of capital efficiency? How much are they spending compared to their ARR? So their sales and marketing spend to their ARR growth, we looked at as roughly 35%. Hey, let's try to figure out what that looks like, and then let's put the plan together, and then let's cut the things that like don't directly impact that. The other thing too, like not to get on a whole nother soapbox, which I promised you I wouldn't be too bad about this, is there's so much bloat that gets built into like quota planning, capacity planning, just because like sales leaders and sales leaders in particular, I'm not picking on, look, I'm one myself, is they operate from a place of fear and needing to build these big buffers. So it's like, hey, so director of sales kind of put together a quota for his team. He puts it together and he says, hey, I only think X number of people are going to hit quota. Let me kind of just factor this by 70%. He turns that into the VP of sales. He does the exact same thing. Then it goes up to the CRO. He does the exact same thing. Next thing you know, you got this 60% buffer or 90% buffer, whatever number, whatever
like
crazy
compounded,
number. Yeah. And so, this took me a little bit because it's about building a relationship with folks. And, it took me kind of my first year really developing trust and a good relationship with our CEO to where I said, hey, look, I'm going to put together the leanest plan possible. I'm going to show it to you, but there's not a lot of room for error. We're really going to have to double down on being great at executing, being great about bringing in the right people, but we're going to have to be really tight here. Like, I need to kind of know, like, if you want these financial constraints to ultimately get us better capital efficiency, if things get sideways, what happens? And he looked at me, he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, hey man, like I've been in sales my whole entire life. And like, I'm not trying to be Captain Doom or Gloom or anything like that. But like, look, like we've been trained to think that way growing up through sales. So it's like, hey, look, you'll hit a number every year.
Yeah,
you're in trouble. And so I had to really kind of take a step back and just kind of ask that question. He was like, well, Tyler, like, what are these scenarios? And I kind of walked him through each one. And he was like, well, look, if we're that percentage of it, we're still, this much growth, 100% growth, 80% growth. And I was like, kind of walked it through it. And I was like, so what does that mean? He's like, we still had a great year. We still had a great year. We still had a great year. And I was like, fantastic. And so a lot of it was, it didn't look like, going back to the whole people thing, is just sitting down and just having a very transparent conversation, having the courage to just kind of talk through some things that are uncomfortable around, like, hey man, like, not trying to operate from a place of fear, but like, I kind of need to understand where the measuring stick here is in terms of, how are we going to be graded out here? And it made me actually operate a lot more bold, to where I was like, okay, well, we're going to build a lean, mean machine with some high growth expectations. And if we don't completely get there, but we still are 90% of that, but, more globally speaking, we have really great KPIs, like really great capital efficiency, double, triple digit growth, which, we had that. It's like, okay, well, this is still a huge win, even though the numbers weren't exactly the way you want it. So, a lot of that's just kind of like killing that bloat, and really kind of trying to figure that stuff out. Not to get on like another whole soapbox here, but like the whole concept of like CAC to LTV is complete nonsense, in my opinion. It's like, okay, we're going to sit here and make up an LTV for an early growth company and like make these projections that it's like 3, 5, 7, 10 years. You're like, you've been in existence for 2 years. Like, what are you doing? And so we really tried to just kind of back into it and say, hey, look, for every dollar that we're spending, how much are we bringing in from a revenue standpoint? Let's keep this super freaking simple. And also let's kind of think about how those dollars are converting. So it's not on just a deal by deal basis. And that's kind of going back to where that 35% makes sense, because it inherently actually kind of implies a conversion rate too, to where it's not like, because a lot of folks say, hey, well, as long as we're spending $1 for every dollar of ARR, $100,000 for every 100,000 we bring in, we're fantastic. I'm like, well, man, that's fantastic when you close every deal.
That's true. Yeah.
A lot of it, a lot of it too is keeping it simple. Look, I am the furthest thing from a financial guru. There's some incredibly smart people out there that have SaaS financial metrics nailed. But our whole thing is, let's keep it simple. Let's make it easy to track, and let's all believe in it. Yeah.
Very cool. Tell me a little bit more about some of the other things that you're doing and that other revenue leaders can be doing from a go-to-market standpoint, if their intention is to be more efficient like this and grow shareholder value outside of just straight ARR growth.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just really kind of look at the plan that you're putting together, and think about where you want to be in terms of just overall cash burn and operational efficiency, and really back into that number. And so whenever you put your plan together, say, okay, well, based on these three scenarios, we're going to end at, growth of X and ARR of X. Okay, what percentage of my cost are going to impact that? And then go get some buy-in on it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, what scenario do we really want to be at? What flavor of a company do we want to be at? And besides that, I mean, Sarah, I don't know if I have any like groundbreaking advice, but like, a lot of it is just be a good steward of capital, make good business decisions. You know, don't rush on stuff, especially hiring and headcount. I've made this mistake before, just like I'm sure a lot of people on this podcast have, to where you put together these really great capacity models, and the first thing you say is, okay, I put this thing together. It took me forever to get alignment with everybody. It's finally approved. Everybody's ready to go. Oh shit, I got to go. I've got to get this thing in place because this thing is just an Excel spreadsheet and all the bodies aren't there. And I can't make this thing work. And you just start working the plan. You lose like, just the hindsight that you're like, hey, look, just waiting 1 or 2 more weeks because you're not 100% sure about a hire. There will be another one. Even in over the past 2 years of just the insane job market we've had, there's always another candidate if you just wait just two more weeks, in my experience. And so, a lot of it is just be a little bit more patient. Don't just blindly work the plan. It's not, it's not just an assembly line where you've got to go buy all these, materials to ultimately create these widgets. They're not all created equal, and they're not all going to be a great fit. And so really trying to kind of figure that out, it is one thing too, is just be patient on it. And just don't rush. It's a lesson I've had to learn. It's a lesson I'm sure a lot of folks have had to learn, but, I feel like a big tendency is like, you finally got this plan, you're proud of yourself, you got it going, you got everybody in alignment. And then there's just like this insane sense of urgency where like reality sets in, you're like, I got to go freaking execute on this plan like now. And so you just go off to the races and you forget that like, the people side of things is something that you just got to get right and just be patient.
Absolutely. One other thing that I'm interested in hearing your perspective on, you mentioned that the CEO is one of these founders that's very, financially focused, and therefore the goals are all kind of aligned around that. And the board is caring about things like that, as opposed to some other things that other boards might be caring about. So tell me about interfacing with the board on these types of really kind of stringent metrics, coming again from more of a sales background where it is a little bit, it's not smoke and mirrors, but it's like, it's going to be,
100%. And like, and I don't want to give this impression that like our board or CEO are like this like hard driving, like, hey, here's these financial blueprint. It's actually quite the opposite. So our capital partners have been very, very patient and flexible in terms of, hey, look, y'all tell us how y'all want to run this business, who y'all want to be, how y'all are going to do it. We're here to support y'all. So a lot of it's just really been self-imposed. And, a lot of it like kind of, our CEO said, hey, look, let's be really good stewards of capital. And fundamentally, like if you get all these things right early, you've just built a better business, period. And it's like the whole traditional model is like, hey, look, for the first 10, 20 million, let's just grow at all cost and we'll figure it out. We'll keep raising capital. We'll just go faster than anybody. And then we'll try to figure all that stuff out. Well, what's happening now is it's like that opportunity is not occurring. Right. And then you kind of just from a culture standpoint, lack the financial discipline and the kind of the behaviors around it and just the mentality around it. But also you haven't put those operating principles in place. And so, from a board standpoint, I will say that this has kind of been more self-imposed that, hey, this is how we want to run our business. This is how we think we should grow. This is the game we want to play. We want to run a little bit counterculture. I mean, from their side, they're like, hey, y'all are doing great. We're here to support y'all. Y'all need if y'all need some more money, we're here.
Yeah.
So a lot of it too has just been, hey, are we, just who do we want to be? And look, Sarah, it's different. Like, so I don't want to like make this big broad statement that this works for everybody, because if you're in a market where it's very freaking competitive and everybody else is doing that, that's different. You know what I mean? To where like, hey, like, you got to kind of level the playing field with the war chest. we're fortunate to where what we're primarily selling against is legacy solutions. So, they're not investing in those products anymore. Now they're big behemoths with great footprints and huge amount of resources. And, there's nothing wrong with them. But, it is situational. And, so, I know some people are probably listening. They're like, well, yeah, my top two competitors just raised a $300 round. Like this guy's ridiculous. So like,
yeah, what am I supposed to do? Sit on my 35 cents and just make that piece of that? Yeah.
In all seriousness though, so like, you do got to really kind of take these things into perspective. We did have a competitor raise like a $80 million round last year, and we're like, okay, do we need to do that? We definitely started like strongly considering things like that. And really what we did is we sat down and we said, okay, let's really start to look at our data. Let's listen, pick up the conversational intelligence from the sales team. Let's, because if you're losing really late in the deal, it's too late, right? But if you're hearing it early on in the conversation that they're coming up, you're seeing them in evaluations whenever they're evaluating other vendors, then we're like, okay, hey, if we start seeing this a lot, we really need to be aware and not get caught flat-footed. And so we were smart about that, but like hadn't necessarily seen that. So and I'm not going to say even if that does happen that we would change course. And quite frankly, I don't think we need to. I think we're building a very smart and responsible business. And a lot of it is that whenever you take on the big VC round or growth equity, whatever it might be, and the revenue goal goes way up, it also kind of forces you where you can't be as selective about who you want to work with in terms of customers too, to where you're turning over every single rock, which you should be, right? And ultimately you get a little bit more desperate because you don't want to walk away from certain deals because the numbers are so much bigger, so much harder. And look, we have very, very aggressive growth goals, and we're fortunate to be great at executing against those. But at the same time, we're smart enough to think about it from a long game standpoint to say, hey, look, is this actually going to be a profitable and healthy customer for us? Are we, from a technical standpoint, are we going to have challenges actually solving these problems? So, I don't know, Sarah, I like maybe another talking point here is, whenever you build a smart business and you've been fiscally responsible and you've done those things, it gives you more optionality because you're not as desperate. It can be smarter, more strategic, things like that. But there is no just like blanket statement, this is a better way or anything like that,
No, but I think it's a great point that you bring up. You just give yourself the flexibility to make smart decisions because you've made smart decisions. And like you're saying, that even when you were, giving the example of having to be kind of quick pulling the trigger with hires, because you're like, oh man, how are we going to hit this revenue target if we don't have the headcount? So we just make the hires, but then we're actually burning more money because they leave and we got to hire someone else and train them again. And it becomes this kind of vicious cycle of making really rash decisions that end up not paying off. So being able to give yourself that space to say like, you know what, we haven't burned through all our cash. We actually use it really efficiently. Let's just take a second to think about all the things that we do and continue to make those smart decisions that have gotten us here and allowed us to have these great metrics. And let's maintain those metrics moving forward. And if and when the time comes, like you say, that you do need to raise a big round because you need to, just hit the accelerator, you can do that. But you've also built those really strong behaviors and practices to be able to use that cash more efficiently. So you got to think that you raising an $80 million round, now we're not getting on the case of whoever raised that round, but as you guys raising the $80 million round and putting those funds to use would be more, it's almost like more money in your pocket than someone else raising 80 million on those habits of non-capital efficient sort of focused or mindset.
I mean, in theory too, I mean, you're right. It's like, if you've shown a track record of being fiscally responsible, then that round actually results in more cash runway. So, anybody that's a shareholder or a stakeholder involved, it's a better situation because it's less likely to be, more dilutive in the future. So yeah, I mean, right there with you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up. We've kind of talked all the way through going into that CRO role for the first time. So going from that really sort of sales focused mentality to bringing it all together, all the ways that you can kind of do that operationally or practically in terms of taking off the labels and bringing the teams together and making sure everyone's looking at the same metrics, compensated on the same metrics. And then some of those other things that you can be looking at instead when it comes to capital efficiency so that you can be making these smart decisions. And then the impact that that has on your business kind of overall. If people want to learn more from you, Tyler, if they want to get in touch with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, feel free to drop me a note on LinkedIn. Look, I love talking shop about this stuff. I'm passionate about it. I love growing businesses. I love everything about what I do. And, more than anything, I love helping folks. I've been very fortunate that there's been some people that have been very helpful to me. And I've had some great mentors and some great coaches and just, had a lot of folks that have helped me out. And so anytime I can return the favor, definitely love doing that. So just feel free to reach out.
Awesome. That's great. And thank you so much for joining us on the Predictable Revenue Podcast. It was so great having your perspective on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's a pleasure being on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And thank you to all of you for joining us on another episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast. Please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button on YouTube so that you can be notified each week when we have wonderful guests joining us like Tyler and other great revenue sales, customer success, sales, whatever. All the things that are going to impact your business. Those people come here and they share the good stuff with us. So we'll catch you again next time.